What if the secret to scaling your business faster wasn't working harder, but learning how to leverage other people's money the right way? Welcome back to another episode of the Vital Wealth Strategies podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Lonergan, and today's conversation is one you don't want to miss. I'm sitting down with Jimmy Rios, the CEO and founder of Rios Business Advisors and Next Level Credit, a true master at helping entrepreneurs unlock capital, build business credit, and create a blueprint for growth without risking everything they've worked so hard to build. Together, we dive deep into the strategies that separate those who stay stuck from those who scale. From building a rock-solid foundation for your business credit, to creating systems that generate additional income streams, to developing the financial discipline and team of advisors that every successful entrepreneur needs. By the end of this episode, you'll understand how to position your business to access the capital you need, not just to survive, but to thrive, and how to do it in a way that sets you up for long-term success. And if you're ready to start building a tax and financial strategy that supports that kind of growth, make sure you visit vitalstrategies.com/tax. That's where you can begin creating a personalized strategy that helps you keep more of what you make and build the kind of financial foundation that fuels real freedom. So grab a notebook, settle in, and listen to the end, because the insights Jimmy shares could completely change the way you think about building wealth in your business. I'm excited about today's conversation. We've got Jimmy Rios, CEO and founder of Rios Business Advisors and Next Level Credit. This is going to be a fun conversation because when we think about building wealth, there's nobody on the Forbes list that doesn't do it without some leverage and being able to borrow money to grow and to build their wealth. So, Jimmy, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Well, thank you, Patrick. It's great to be here.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to this conversation. I think about the problems entrepreneurs have. I'll say traditional funding often requires personal guarantees, high interest, restrictive terms, that type of thing, which are all really, really frustrating. I also think about the entrepreneur just feeling trapped. Like, man, I've got opportunity in front of me, but I'm unable to unlock the capital needed to scale without jeopardizing everything that we've built. And also just thinking about, entrepreneurs shouldn't have to risk their entire financial future to grow and scale the business. So I'm looking forward to getting into how we're going to unlock some of these problems today. But before we do that, can you give us a little bit of your background and tell us a little bit about your business?
Yeah, I definitely appreciate it, Patrick. I've been doing this since 1997. I was a young kid going to ASU in Arizona and trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life. And, it was a 7-year plan instead of a 4-year plan because I changed so many degrees and trying to figure out what I would. And there was an opportunity to be a branch manager trainee in a company called Commercial Credit, which ended up getting gobbled up by Solomon Smith Barney and Travelers Group. They became Citigroup. And so I was working with this conglomerate at a young age, and I became a manager in that space. And I learned a lot about, commercial credit and consumer finance, underwriting, a lot of the different facets and leveraging with really high interest components towards the end of the 90s. And in the 2000s, at the beginning, I decided if I was going to make changes, if I was going to be able to help people the way that I envisioned, I was going to have to probably do it on my own. And I didn't know how I was going to go about doing that. So I delved headfirst into property management and then went into building Rios Financial Group more out of necessity because a lot of the clients that were coming to me were referrals. We didn't have social media at the time. I did a job for this person and they would tell somebody and it just kind of went from there. And a lot of my clients were Latino, Hispanic, Spanish speaking, and I felt almost like I was helping my parents, right? And being first generation Colombian American, helping them, through their travels in entrepreneurship and all the different things that were needed. I had to start doing that for my clients. So I learned how to do taxes and insurance and mortgages and credit and all these different verticals that I never thought that I would be already touching. Well, out of necessity, I dove into those head first because if I could help this one person go from renting to owning and then help them build their business and help escalate them to a better position in life, they were telling everyone, right? So all I did was take it one step further in my evolution, right? Where we eventually, it morphed into these verticals that we are now, right? It was Next Level Credit does the credit. Those Business Advisors is the consulting firm. We have Rios Realtors that does the real estate. And so we had all these different components. And at the end of the day, it was always about education. It came
Hmm.
down to really finding ways to help people. Many of them just didn't know what they
Hmm.
didn't. They
Yeah.
had good ideas. They had a lot of fire and wanted to go, but they made a lot of mistakes because I made this mistake too in going and bootstrapping and using all our means possible to leverage. And then we get into debt and then we
Yeah.
don't know how to pay it back because there's all these variables outside of our business that pull the strings. And now we're basically stuck. We can't delegate. We can't get employees. We can't buy equipment, tools, CRMs, all these things we need. And
Hmm.
so they come back and say, I need money. I need more money. I
Yeah.
just gave you money
Yeah.
6 months ago. What's the problem? Well, the problem is there wasn't a blueprint. There was a
Hmm.
guided mechanism to help people not only leverage, but leverage properly and know how to untie. So
Yeah.
that's what we developed for a lot of our clients.
Jimmy, I love this because one of the things that you're hitting on is sometimes I need access to capital so quickly because I've got this short-term problem, but I haven't thought through the long-term impact of borrowing those dollars. And the scriptures tell us, like, with sort of warning lights, like, hey, slave to the lender. They're not saying don't borrow the money, but they're just saying, hey, when you borrow the money from this person, like, they're going to own a piece of you. And so be careful around that. And so I appreciate the education that comes with, like, hey, let's understand how to develop a process around borrowing money in an intelligent way and make sure we have the cash flow to support it. Because I've had friends and clients come to us and they've said, hey, I'm going to take this short term loan and do this thing. And I'm looking at their financials and I'm like, that's a terrible idea because what we need to do is solve the problem that got you into this
Yes, sir.
situation. Now, we might borrow the money, but not before we solve the problem. Otherwise, we're just like kicking the can down the road and we've dug ourselves into a deeper hole versus getting ourselves out of the hole. So I think that's
You,
brilliant.
you make a valid point is because when people come to us and they have these grand visions, if we don't hit the problem head on and we start looking at their financials and we start seeing all these things that are happening down here, they want to go over here, but they're going to have to go through a lot of mud to get to the other side. And
Yeah.
and we've gone through those. We have case studies that we've been able to fix and help in muddling through that water and making it clear again. But
Yeah.
it takes a very devoted mentor, guide, so
Yeah.
to speak, to be able to follow the disciplines that we've implemented to get you through that. Let to your own accord. If we don't implement these checks and balances on our side, you're going to run amok and you're going to do the things that you've always done and what got you there in the first place.
Right.
So when we bring somebody on board inside of our blueprint for success, we're very adamant about talking about the do's and don'ts. And we're
Hmm.
very strict about how we're going to go about doing it because we've developed a plan that does work if followed.
Yeah.
And the very few that haven't followed it have been the recipients of it not working for them. And then obviously your plan doesn't work. Well, does your plan work when you go to the gym and then come home and eat a big cake and then don't go back to the gym or do anything to be able to help yourself?
Hmm.
It doesn't just work that way. And people forget that we work in a process environment where everything does work if it's in multi-layered with steps that make sense if followed. If
Yep.
not, you're basically, you don't need our help. You're just going to go and do it on your own and you're going to run amok. And then you're going to build more problems is what happens. So we're very good at identifying the problems head on first. And once we identify the problems, we need to have a blueprint for success on the solutions. And
Yep.
that might not be in 3 months or six
Hmm.
months like you thought it would be, right? That might take a year or two. Can it be done? Yes. Can it be
Hmm.
done quickly? Yes, yes.
Yeah.
But you need to learn to accept that we need to guide you and help you and not try to do everything yourself.
Yeah.
Entrepreneurs are very stubborn. They want to do everything themselves. They don't know how to delegate. They don't want to pay the money that's needed to be able to do it the right way. So they try to do it themselves. They'll go in circles,
Hmm.
chasing the tail, then get exhausted. And then they come back 6 months or a year later, say, Jimmy, I need your help. Hey, I'm going to help you whenever you're ready.
Yep.
This time around, we're going to do it my way.
Yeah. I love that. And there's a few highlights I want to point out. First, I love your story. I love how you just kept saying yes to opportunities that came your way, solving a new set of problems. And you've built out something that's really brings a ton of value to the marketplace. And we see this with our clients all the time. We've seen clients that start in one area of an industry and then they keep saying yes. And all of a sudden they're either migrated to a new section of that industry or they're just delivering a wide variety of services and are running very successful businesses. So I appreciate that. The next thing I want to touch base on is I love the idea of having a blueprint and sort of some steps that people can follow through on.
Yeah.
And I think there's something that you highlighted as well that is a critical piece. Entrepreneurs, and it doesn't matter where you're at, to get to the next level, you have to bring a new level of thinking to the equation.
Well,
The same
I,
thinking.
I,
And so what happens is like if we had that new thinking, we would just go do it, but we don't. And so paying professionals, paying people that can bring that new level of thinking, whether that's a financial thinking, operational thinking, I just look at strategy that can be applied to the business. Like all of those levels of thinking are so valuable. It's almost impossible to put a value on it because you just think about, when I look at my business and the bottom line, every dollar that hits that bottom line across certain thresholds is now worth 3, 5, 10, 12 times from an enterprise value point of view. And so it's like, man, if I can figure out how to put an extra $100,000 to the bottom line and that
yeah,
makes my business worth $1 million more, like, why don't I pay somebody
right,
10, 20, $30,000 to help me consult in my business and grow? So I'm off on a little tangent there, but I would love to get into your blueprint and
yeah,
hear about
right,
some of these foundational actions that people should be looking at to make sure
definitely.
that they're in a healthy spot to
Right.
borrow money and go to the next level.
So let me break this down in the most efficient way possible because we only have an hour show, right?
Hmm.
And I I'm a student of the game, right?
Hmm.
For 25 years, I've been saying when Robert Kiyosaki came out with his books, I became a master in that realm.
Hmm.
But I also studied I could say the opposite, right? The Dave Ramseys of the world, and
Yeah.
I wanted to get perspectives
Hmm.
inside of their thinking because there is a space for everything in your life, right? But if you only focus and you stay like this inside of that world, you're never going to branch out to be able to do the things you need to do. So talking to a Dave Ramsey about arbitrage, debt, you're just going to waste your time.
Hmm.
It's not going to do anything for you. Now taking some of his concepts on a personal level, right? And being able to differentiate your business from your personal, and it's two worlds, right? You can stay really well in your personal life if you manage controls, right? Budget, doing these things. Your business though is a different monster. It relies on blood coming through its system. It needs new blood. And to do that, you need to leverage properly to keep
Hmm.
getting the things you need to be able to grow, right?
Yeah.
So understand when I start talking about assets and liabilities, right? We're going to build on an asset column that's going to produce a third arm of income for your business to keep doing the things it needs to do. To get there, though, to build that bridge, we're going to have to jump into some form of debt, right?
Hmm.
Because
Yeah.
most of us don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars to do the things we do. And even if we did, think about a franchise owner. How much do they have to come out liquidity wise to get into a franchise model just
Hmm.
because of the model, right? So what we do is we build the third and the fourth quadrants on the Kiyosaki principles, where we're building a system, right?
Hmm.
It's going to generate money to make money or cash on cash return, right? These
Yeah.
are two important facets because in the second quadrant of Kiyosaki, you're the business owner and you're the technician. You're doing all the work, right?
Yep.
Those are your two hands. But in the third quadrant, we're building a system that's a third arm of
Hmm.
your business that, regardless of what you do with your two hands, is producing income over here, right?
Yep.
Why? Because if I can properly now have the barriers of entry brought down so that I can pay to get an advisor, a proper tax strategist, a CPA, all the people in my team that's going to help me elevate the business with proper advice, I can now put that money to work where in the buckets that they need to be able to produce optimally. Now my business is producing at a much higher level in return. Did
Hmm.
I use leverage? Yes.
Hmm.
In our program, I might borrow 100,000 and I might put 25,000 to work in my system over here, right, that I
Yep.
insure and start generating a 5, 10x return, that money's going to come back as income, and it's going to help defray the debt service coverage for your debt. It's
Yeah.
going to pay off their debt. I didn't take it out of my hard-earned money. So this way, when I meet with my tech strategy, I say, look, I need the value of this business to keep growing. I don't need to cut all my profits. And in fact, set me up as an S corporation, pay me a salary of $100,000 a year. I need to be put right on paper. Now I want all my profits to flow to the top so I can start showing that I can afford the things I can afford and be fundable in the eyes of the banks. Now I got my third arm over here that's generating 1099 income. I need to find ways to offset the capital gains from that income. But over here, I'm setting myself up with business lines of credit with 0% interest. So I'm not having to bootstrap anymore on this side, on the personal side. I paid on my debt on the personal side. I took the Dave Ramsey School of Knots over here, but I
Yeah.
took the Kiyosaki principles over here. Now
Yeah.
we got worlds working together side by side, and we're crossing them. We're elevating our lives. We're setting up trusts, holdings company, S corps, whales, estate plans, all this stuff that people are saying, oh, it's impossible. I know I need it, but I don't have it.
Right.
What do you think? Everything has its place in the solar system that we built, but you need to take direction and learn through our experts, not just Jimmy, it's
Yeah.
Patrick, it's God, it's all these people that
Right.
we work with. Together, we make a community and we make things happen because you were able to finally bring down your ego and
Yeah.
accept help with humility.
Man, Jimmy, this is a masterclass. I love it. You've hit on so many powerful things here. Can you just maybe walk us through a little bit about what it takes to maybe build some credit in my business? Because I think that's we're so used to, I'll say, the personal credit and, our credit score and that type of thing. But I think business credit is something different. Can you just walk us through a little bit of that? I know we could probably talk for a couple hours on that topic, but
No, and the great thing
I think
about it is I saw the need for it. I wrote a book. It's called Decoding the Mystery of Business Credit. On my website at riosbusinessfunding.com, I put the ebook in there, but I also have it on Amazon for like $16, right? And this is what I call the blueprint of being able to build business credit. Now, when I talk to people about building business credit, they get very scared, like it's so daunting. Listen, everything has to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And it's not that difficult if you follow direction, but you need to follow something, right? So I laid it out, right? And the first thing is, as a person, we need to learn how to read our own personal credit, right? Because personal credit is the bridge that gets you over to business credit, right? There's two different ways that we've developed business credit. One is what I call the fast route, and one is the slow route, right? The slow route is more inexpensive and it takes longer for a reason, right? It's doable, but it's going to take you at least 2 years of getting it off the ground. The fast route we have because we understand what you said earlier. I'm in business, opportunity knocks, and I need credit. Well, if I can get it done in 90 days as opposed to 2 years with our fast track program, then I'm going to go that route. Is it more expensive? Yes. It's going to be more expensive because I'm getting you $500,000, 0% interest for 2 years inside of 90 to 120 days.
Yeah.
And so that's something that you can't do in the traditional way. But in the traditional way, at least to get something going until we can figure out how we're going to leverage you to get you where you need to be, we start working on understanding our credit, right? We need to fix your credit. Don't do it on your own because you don't know the tools. Even if you spent hours on YouTube trying to figure it out, are you going to do it the right way? And how much time are you spending? Bring it to the next level credit. We'll work through the nuances and get your credit where it needs to be. Once you get your credit to a level where it needs to be, we're going to start setting you up with your basis and your foundation. It's not just having an LLC to have an LLC. You have to have a fundable business. What that means is the perception of building this vision has to be right. And when we go to set you up, we're going to have you change a few things. Like, for example, if you have your website going to your house instead of a physical building that we can put as a virtual office, we don't want to see a Google Earth of your house because it's not credible as a business. You want to see business. We want to put a website that doesn't have your email as a Gmail, but an actual info at
Yeah.
xyzcorp.com. We want to have a number that is with 411, that
Hmm.
is not just your cell phone, or you
Yep.
can put your cell phone, you want an office phone, even an e-fax or something to give you credibility.
Yep.
Because as an underwriter, I'm looking at tons of files,
Hmm.
and credibility is the number one thing I look at, right? So it starts there. It sounds so kind of cliche, like, why didn't I think of that type of thing? But you'd
Yep.
be amazed at how many people just go through the motions because they got an LLC.
Yeah. Yeah, this is great. And one thing that I think you're also highlighting, like we talk to our clients so much about the value of, okay, call it liquidity, cash on hand. Okay. Fancy term for liquidity. And so we like to have some minimum and maximum thresholds there.
Mhm.
Another thing that we also like to have as a source of liquidity is lines of credit and debt, because
That
the best time to get it is when you don't need it. The hardest
100%.
time to get a
Yeah.
loan is when I'm like running out of cash and I'm struggling. And it's like the bank's like, well, I don't know if this is a good idea. Versus
Yeah.
like when our cash balances are continuing to grow, revenues are growing. It's like, great, let's get some of those opportunities opened up and available to us. And we like to have as much liquidity as we can possibly get. So, we want to put those dollars to work. And if I can utilize outside capital versus my own capital, like that's
Other
that's
people's
that's
money,
fantastic.
OPM at its best.
OPN, that's right.
Yeah.
So I think this is fantastic. You said something that I'd like to just explore a little bit more. You said, if I could borrow $500,000 at 0% interest for a couple of years, can you tell me more about that? Because that doesn't sound real in my mind,
Yes.
So yeah.
Well, yeah, let me break that down because the reality is, if you think in a traditional standpoint in underwriting, right, they're going to want 2 years of tax returns. They're going to want to see all these variables that you may or may not have, right?
Mhm.
One point of distinction when you're working with a company that's been around for a long time, right? We've worked with over 200 institutions continuously nationwide, right?
Mhm.
So there's a track record that goes behind submitting a file from Rios Business Funding as opposed to just a common Joe doing an application at an institution, now knowing the rules of the game, hoping that it sticks, and it doesn't. Now they just shop the credit because they use their personal credit. And so there's different rules that we go by to make it happen, right? So
Mhm.
when we construct that presentation is very key for us in being able to get the approvals that we get, right? Have you ever heard of people getting like an American Express black, with
Yep.
a ton of leverage, and they weren't asked for any financials, right?
Mhm.
Because there's such a strong way of presenting somebody that way that minimizes the risk. And we took that one step further, where we said, well, what if we could construct the business acumen so that it is fundable, and we can now get those same types of lines of credit to be able to give to to this client, right? Now you had your company. I had a podcast before this one. He was talking about, well, he just has a new company that he just started in 2025. How's he going to be able to qualify? I said, well,
Mhm.
we're going to do it different. See, you're thinking in the same way everybody else does. I had to build around this one. But what if I already built it on paper, everything that's needed? It's
Mhm.
called a shell corporation or an age shell corporation that has all the acumen. It's a
Mhm.
business in a box with everything that's needed to get funding one step further, because we already knew what bank A, B, and C wanted. We already can submit it, but we go one further and we put a personal guarantor on that corporation to serve as the CFO. So you go and purchase this company, right? It's an asset for you. It's a tax write-off for you. What you did was, in essence, build a lending entity for yourself. So now when I go and I acquire the 500,000 in liquidity, now you can do a note to yourself, to your company A from company B, and now
Mhm.
you can lend yourself as many times and at whatever interest rate you want, perfectly legal, right? And these
Mhm.
are now two companies that you own under your holdings company, right?
Yep.
And so all we did was just take one concept that they've been doing for years in doing this and just made it one step further and faster for individuals. Now we have individuals that say, well, can I just build from the ground up? You can build in whatever way you want, I'm just giving you options because
Right.
if I can go and get you $50 to $100,000 and I can leverage you properly, look at it this way. This is one way we do it. We get 100,000, right? I'll take 25,000. I'll put it in my investment arm producing liquidity, right? Producing money. I'll take 50,000 and I'll get it and I'll do the hybrid age show corporation program so that I can in 90 to 120 days generate income from that money, right? Now I have two sources coming together to bring me money, right?
Yep.
I've both taken down barriers of entries because of my strategy. Right now, we still have debt, right? Because it costs money. So we're going to use one side to pay off the other side. But we've built structures because you don't have to just do it one time. You need 1.5 million, then let's get 3 structures set up under your holdings company. You're going to do the same exact thing. And because there's 3 different entities, it's like lending to 3 different people, right?
Yep.
So we do it that way. Now, banks will lend money on collateral. So if I show a balance sheet that's strong, right, I can get more funding from a bank for any other project that's short term. Fix and flippers, for example, come to us with that mindset. They want to buy 3 houses, but they don't know how because their hard money lender only gives them X amount for one, right? We do blanket policies where we can put together cost collateralization and really make it happen. And this is called creative financing at its best. And it's thinking outside the box.
I love a lot of these ideas, and I'm fascinated by how the banks look at this, but we'll set that idea aside for just a second. I'm curious if you can give us a case study, because a lot of our clients have built a business. They have things like collateral and some cash on hand and assets that, but they're looking to grow a little farther, faster. And so can you give us maybe a case study where you've seen somebody come in and just give us an example of how they borrowed some money, what they used that for, how you've seen this work really efficiently to see things grow quickly?
Well, I have a great case study that, he wasn't as, I guess, educated or elaborate as maybe some of your clients would be. He actually came to us with a 560 credit score, and all he had to his name was the equity in his house. He couldn't get equity loans in the traditional sense because of his credit score, right? But what could I do, right? I could leverage and get a private money loan, right, for 50,000, right? So we did that. We left 25,000 in reserves for any things that he needed, and we put 25,000 in our platform to work for him. That 25,000 we insured, right? So he was never going to lose the 25,000, but we also had to cover his debt service, which was like $600 a month, and we put that money to work, right? Over the course of the year, from August to August, he was able to take distributions of $90,000 from his portfolio, but his portfolio from the compound interest is sitting at $296,000, right? So what did we do? We set up his corporation. We got him a salary. Now he can take from his portfolio. He can invest in his real estate. We got him the lines of credit that he needs to be able to do the things he wants to do. But more important than any of that, we got him in touch with all our advisors in the proper channels to be able to do the things he wants without him kind of spinning his wheels trying to, where do I go now? What do I do now? Like, these are not people that are very well versed in the world. It's always giving $1 million to an NBA player who's 18 years old. They're going to blow it if they don't do it right. So in a matter of a year, we put systems in place. We built out a blueprint and foundation to take him to the next level, because now he's got capital. Now he's got liquidity, but we're also going to have to cross the bridge of capital gains tax because he's going to start he already took out 91,000 in distribution. So he's got to pay taxes on that. So now we start looking at different avenues in investing that money so we can do more with it. But for him, I mean, he was able to leave his 9-to-5 job, so we just basically liberated somebody from the golden handcuffs because we set up a plan. He can now pay himself a $10,000 a month salary, which he wasn't making before. Let's understand that. But now he has money to be able to do the things he wants, and time, which is a commodity that priceless.
Yeah. This is good. If this conversation got you thinking about how much more you could do with the right financial strategy in place, then it's time to take the next step. At vitalstrategies.com/tax, we'll help you build a personalized plan to minimize your taxes, free cash flow up, and create a clear path to lasting wealth. Whether you're looking to unlock capital, protect your profits, or simply take control of your financial future, this is where it starts. Don't wait until tax season to find out you could have done more. Visit vitalstrategies.com/tax today and start building the strategies your business deserves. So I want to go back to my bank question. I'm curious about the lenders, and then, is there any question from them? Like you talked about, I can acquire an entity and then use that entity to, be sort of my new lending arm. Is there any questions from the banks on how that necessarily ties back to me and my ability to make sure that, all of the money I'm borrowing is paid back? I'm just curious how the banks look at the strategy, and if there's any questions there on, just making sure that they're comfortable. And
No, I mean, the reality is that we're going to have clients that are going to come through and we're going to have to show financials. That's fine. We have to show financials and look at the conditions that bank specifically requires. Then, but we're so ahead in the game of this chess match that we know where to take the client based on what's given, right? So if somebody comes to us as a startup, we'll look at different avenues for startups than we would somebody who's seasoned, who maybe could show and demonstrate profitability, but they just weren't, their CPAs didn't advise them correctly. And all they show is a negative because they wanted to avoid paying taxes, right? So then we restructure their taxes to show what it needs to show to get an approval, right? Because we go all kinds of different routes. And like when I bought my house, like I had to take my wife and put her on paper, right? So she had to show $75,000 net. That put a dent in having to pay the IRS,
right.
But that's okay because it was part of the blueprint. We knew that in 6 months we would have that paid off, and it was just part of getting from one type to the other because you got to showcase proper, right? So we'll guide you in that. When you come to us and say, "Look, I have this scenario. I don't have 2 years of taxes or a cash flowing business like a landscape business that has, they never did their taxes. They have a lot of cash coming in, but can't even prove it, right? So, but everything's possible with the IRS if you bring it out with financials, if you bring it out and know how to do it strategically. That's where a lot of people go wrong, is because fear kicks in and they don't have the proper guidance, so they don't do nothing. And they keep, and then they'll go and get into ugly loans, right? MCAs, and we're seeing those too. We do MCA bailouts and consolidate those and put you in, we go ugly to go pretty sometimes. Something might be so bad that if we have to leverage that route, we have a plan in place so they're not stuck, basically cannibalizing on their business and eventually having to bow out and fold their business.
Right. And I understand some of the payday loans and that type of thing. Can you explain what an MCA is? I'm not familiar with that.
Yeah, MCA is a short for merchant cash advance. So what you'll see is that there are cash flowing businesses that can show deposits on the bank statements, but profitability wise, because they've instructed their accountant or bookkeeper to write everything off, they show no income. So they're not fundable in their case because they can't even afford to pay on their mortgage on paper, right? So these MCA companies will lend them a percentage based on deposits. And many times they've got to pay on this debt on a weekly basis. So it becomes almost like the payday loan business for businesses. But it's sad because they'll put liens on the business, UCC1 lien, and if they're late, they can close our accounts. I mean, they can make some major damage to a business where it almost makes you blacklisted to be able to even get anything SBA-wise or higher level, right? So listen, we've worked with every type of lender out there. So there's a place for everything. When we recourse and use an MCA loan, it's very strategic in nature, or arbitrage, or the ability to make more than what is being paid out in interest has to be there and it has to be followed, because we can get you out of an MCA loan quickly, but we have to follow a path. What most people do is they'll get an MCA loan hedging that their business is going to produce enough until it doesn't. Then it goes backwards, right?
Yeah, no, and this is exactly the scenario. I had my friend come to me and say, "Hey, I'm thinking about borrowing this money." And it was from one of the merchant
Mhm.
credit, right? And they were going to take like 20% of his revenue, because they're capturing all the money coming in. And I'm like, we need to be very careful before we do this because we've got to fix some things that got us into this issue before we are, digging this hole a little deeper. And, ultimately it wasn't a path they decided to go because there's,
It can be devastating.
yeah,
But
yeah,
the ones we brought through the program that had to go that route,
yeah.
we had to very systematically use our program to pay off that debt. Right?
Hmm.
It literally was used as just a very short term solution,
Yeah.
right? Because in that 90 days, maybe that we paid high interest to get that money,
Hmm.
we fixed their credit to put them in a better position
Yeah.
to be able to refinance and do the things that we do and paying off that debt.
Yeah. And you also highlighted a point too that is important. We have clients on, I'll say different ends of the spectrum. There's some clients that we advise through some of the materials we produce and whatnot that are trying to keep the tax bill at zero and every possible expense. And they're buying things, to keep the tax bill at zero. And
Yeah.
it's like, stop spending all of the money out of the business. Profit is actually good. And we
Right.
need some of those things to be bankable. And
Right.
at the end of the day, if we want our business to have any enterprise value whatsoever, it has to have EBITDA, has to have bottom line, net
Thank you.
income, And so,
Yes. Your X factor for the valuation of that business is tied to that profit margin. And
yep.
if you cut it, you're basically killing your exit strategy.
Right, totally. And so it's like, okay, you can do this, but your business is going to have no value. And we see business owners get to the end of their career and they think they have this thing that's worth millions and millions of dollars. And it's like, it's not worth anything because your financials are a mess. You run every possible expense through there. You buy all this, I'll say crap you don't need. And like, it's not an effective way to build wealth or cash flow or any of those other things. So I think the
Well, and here's
points
one
there are
mistake I
great.
notice almost every one of them do. The ones that are positioned like that, where we made 2 or 3 years of taxes, and every year it's the same. It's like they came to a number that they feel comfortable, right? I
Hmm.
just saw one that I think only pays about maybe $3,000 or $4,000 a year in actual owing the IRS, but
Hmm.
they show still very little profit, right? And why is that? Is because they're CPA, and not every CPA does this.
Hmm.
Not every bookkeeper does this for them. But they're basically they're going by what the CPA says. They're not
Hmm.
looking at other strategies. So it's almost like you need brain surgery, but you're just sticking to the recommendation of a general doctor, right? Who says, "Well, go take Excedrin for your headache," but you need brain surgery, right? You're not looking at a deeper level to see what options they have. So they don't employ a tax strategist that can give them some solutions to be able to keep the profit margin high and still reach the goal of taking care of the IRS, right? So they're almost feeding both sides of the picture. By
Hmm.
structuring yourself properly with some of the things we teach, this is how you're able to gobble it up month in and month out and not be afraid to do the things we're doing, right?
Yeah.
Because that's how you structure things. But people need to understand that they're going to have to get some guidance and mentorship to get there.
Hmm. Yeah. No, Jimmy, this is great. So I want to recap a few things that we've talked about. That's a fantastic tool, but it can also be really dangerous. So if you don't build the proper foundation and really have the underlying skill set and the advisors around you on how to handle this business credit in a way that is going to help you versus hurt you, it can be a problem. And so I love the things that you were saying there. I also think there's really interesting opportunities that we can utilize to get access to capital and use some of that arbitrage. I've always wanted to be a bank in the context of like, if I can borrow money at 2%, loan it out at 4, 5, 6, 7, 12%, like that's exciting to me. And so, if we can think about how we do that in our business, that is a fantastic way to go. And then there's also just what we'll call financial management that's critical, right? Like I've got to have good books. I've got to have good financial discipline. I've got to have good advisors around me that are telling me good advice on how to sort of manage my financials and my accounting and my tax strategy in a way that is going to be best for me to grow long term. So this has been great. Is there anything else we should add to this conversation around business finances and sort of borrowing capital
Yes,
to grow and
I
well,
really feel that, it's just touching on that subject of properly having your bookkeeping and your accounting structure, right? Having another
mhm,
set of eyes to look through that is utterly important,
mhm,
because if you're just being swayed by somebody because they're only charging you X amount per year for your taxes, and you're just looking at the bottom dollar as, well, I don't want to pay more than X, it's because you're not doing something behind the scenes that should be done right. Because if I
mhm,
have $10,000 or $15,000 sitting in my coffers to offset any taxes that may have to be paid, I don't really care about that because I'm now focused on growing my business, doing the things that need to be done, and I'm not worried about that bottom dollar. So we need to turn things around, like you said earlier about the mindset, right?
mhm,
We keep putting so much emphasis on the scarcity mindset and living, as a minimalist instead of thinking big and wanting to achieve more. Well, how do you think the Rockefellers and the big wigs of the world have done it over the years? Do you think
mhm,
they were thinking of getting a tax return of X amount just so they could take a vacation? Or do you think they put things in place long before that? So
mhm.
taxes were always taken care of. They could take their vacations when they wanted. They always had money in some place. The reserves were there, right? They prepared for contingencies so that, if something happened, they were fully prepared for anything, right?
Yeah.
That's how we got to start thinking, not in a minimalistic way. Because if you're going to think as a minimalist, that's what you're going to get:
Mhm.
minimal returns, minimal results, right? And have strategy in place so you can win at this game that we play. And you
Yeah.
can do it. Anybody can do it. I mean, I did it losing everything. I lost
Yeah.
everything. Came from the bottom and worked my way back up. And I live in such a humble place now that I don't need the riches of the
Mhm.
world. I've
Right.
learned to live with what I have. And when you lose everything, you become humble to appreciate and be grateful for what you do have. So
Right.
maybe this TV is just enough for me, right? Maybe
Right.
this watch is just enough for me. And if I
Mhm.
want a trip to Colombia, hey, let's go,
Yep.
right? And
Yep.
I'll use my points and get the trip for free. And whatever I do pay, I'll write them off,
Yep.
right? So there's strategy behind everything I do.
I love it. Jimmy, this has been fantastic. And I do love even the comment. And I don't know too many entrepreneurs that have had this nice, smooth ride to the top. I've been at the top and been broke and then sort of been back again. And you do have a different perspective. All the things that you thought important from a materialistic point of view the first time around, they're not quite that valuable anymore. And figure out pretty quickly that the most valuable things in life happen to be the people and the relationships you have, the experiences, both good and bad, the learning and growth, the contribution you can make to this world. And then I'll call it our health, right? Like it could be our spiritual health, our emotional health, our physical health. Those are all critical factors. And it's like, I'd rather see somebody live a rich life in those things versus have $100 million and nobody likes them and they didn't do anything. So I think that's a brilliant point.
100%.
I think your website's a fantastic resource, riosbusinessfunding.com. We'll have a link to that in the show notes. We'll also have a link to your
So
book on Amazon. But
yeah,
yeah, you get
and
the
then
ebook for
YouTube,
free. But
the YouTube channel at Rio's Business Funding has a ton of videos
yeah,
that we talk about a lot of these things, a lot of these concepts. The eye level to high level program. If you Google high level to high level, you're gonna get tons of nuggets of information on how we've taken a structure that never it was unheard of being able to do it in this fashion,
yep,
and became a pioneer in bringing this to the masses. And I think that's where you become a differentiator, when you can bring solutions to the high level and take yourself to the high level. You
yeah,
know,
yeah. No, this is fantastic. I really do appreciate all of the wisdom and knowledge you've given us here today. When I think about taking action on these things and having access to more capital, it's just a margin of safety. And then second, we think about we've been on a really nice economic run for I'll
yeah,
say since 2008. It's been up and to the right for the most part, and we
yeah,
haven't been through a real recession. And I think about those that thrive through a recession have access to dollars, right? A, to survive, and then B, to take advantage of all of the opportunity now that's around us when everybody else is struggling. When there's blood in the streets, I think that's a Rothschild
yes,
quote. When
right.
there's blood in the streets, that's the time to go invest. And I think the things you're talking about are a fantastic opportunity to position ourselves for those things. And then you think about what happens if we don't take action on this stuff. So we don't have access to capital. It could mean the end of our business, could mean the, bankruptcy, starting over again. And that's no fun.
And I've been a recipient on that end as well. And so that would be the PTSD that comes from that has forced me to think differently, the mindset and how I make my day. I always say RPA, right? Revenue producing activities in everything that I do, right? So if it's investing, I'm thinking like that. If it's, work, I'm thinking like that. Everything from working out to my health, I'm compounding. To my love with my wife and my kids, I'm constantly compounding. Right? Compound is called the eighth greatest wonder of the world in more ways than just, money. But if you can understand the concept of it and how we can make it work in your favor, you are going to be liberated in so many more ways than you would ever imagine. And I'm glad that we would have this forum to express that, because I think there's more people that need to be a case study and be able to say, I'm willing to run through, let's go. What do we got to do? What's step one? Let's start with step one.
Yeah. Yeah. And Jimmy, I appreciate how you've really studied this topic of finance. And we've looked at everybody from Dave Ramsey to Kiyosaki. I think both of those guys are brilliant. They take totally different approaches and they both have some wisdom. Now, I lean more towards the Kiyosaki side of the equation versus the Ramsey side. But, Ramsey's probably, he might be the first person to get to $1 billion net worth without using any debt. And it's like, that's an incredible thing.
But you know what's funny, man? It's like I listen to all those Susan. I listen to the trajectories, but I've also looked at Grant Cardone and some of these other people that are in the spectrum. And listen, what I got from almost every single one of them is the ability to change their mindset and to think bigger and think differently. They didn't stay stagnant. They didn't complain. They went into action, right? They sought help, right? And that's ultimately if you talk to any successful person in their realm, they did it through those channels, right? And there might be different methodologies and factors that they weighed in putting it together, but that's how I did it too. It was like taking a little bit from this person, taking a little bit here. I never claimed to have done any other stuff on my own. All I did was just take little bits and pieces from everybody. And a lot of mistakes. I did make a lot of mistakes in the process, but I never gave up. I wanted to keep going and escalating and finding ways. And I did go back to work many times to corporate, and I hated it. And I was like, that was my motivating factor to get out and do it again. Some people call it crazy, right? Insanity. But the difference is when you're in insanity mode, you're doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. With me, I was doing it. I was going back out of necessity, but I never fooled in my cards on the other side. I looked at it more like Edison going back to the lab after an explosion, right? And say, okay, let's clean up and let's get back to building. And that's what I would do. I had to use, but that's also the precursor to my high-level program was because I needed to find another way than going and spending 40 hours a week at somebody else's job. I needed to find a way to supplement my income.
Yeah. And there's also the thing I love about what you just said is you're being responsible. I've got responsibilities. I got people that need for me to make sure the lights are still on and food's still on the table. And so I'm going to check that box while I'm growing this thing over here. And at some point, it will be too expensive for me to show up to my job anymore because I'm that revenue generating activities, you were talking about.
Money by going to work.
That's right. So I love all that. Jimmy, this has been a fantastic conversation. I really appreciate all of the wisdom and insight. And riosbusinessfunding.com is the place to go to learn more about everything that Jimmy's got going on. I think leverage is a fantastic tool. And even going back to Dave Ramsey, he might not be using debt as leverage, but he's finding new and different opportunities to leverage with spreading his message and utilizing people to marketing to get that out there. So that's great. Jimmy, I appreciate you. Appreciate all of your insight and wisdom.
You've been awesome. You went too fast.
All right. Wonderful. I agree with you. Too fast for sure. We might have to do it again here soon. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Vital Wealth Strategies podcast. I hope you found as much value in this conversation with Jimmy Rios as I did, and you're walking away with actionable ideas to take your business to the next level. If this episode resonated with you, or if you know another entrepreneur who could benefit from these insights, do me a favor. Share this episode with them. You never know how much of an impact it could make. And don't forget, if you're ready to start building a personalized tax and financial strategy that supports your growth, head over to vitalstrategies.com/tax. It's the first step towards keeping more of what you make, scaling with confidence, and creating lasting wealth. Before we wrap up, just a quick note. Everything we share here is meant to educate and empower you, but it's not specific financial, tax, or legal advice. Make sure to talk with your own advisors to see how these strategies fit your unique situation, especially when it comes to debt. The Bible tells us that we're slave to the lender, and if we're not careful, debt can be a problem. And so it can help us absolutely scale our business, but use it wisely. So remember, you're a vital entrepreneur. You're vital because you're the backbone of our economy, creating opportunities, driving growth, and making an impact. You're vital to your family, creating abundance in every aspect of life. And you're vital to me because you're committed to growing your wealth, leading with purpose, and creating something truly great. Thank you for being a part of this incredible community of vital entrepreneurs. I appreciate you, and I look forward to having you back here next week on the Vital Wealth Strategies podcast, where we help entrepreneurs minimize their taxes, master wealth, and optimize their lives.